All right, so welcome to this first week check-in. This is an information session for our 3MT training and challenge program. And this week, we're going to do cohort connections and then have you talk about strategy in preparation. Just a couple reminders that there will be preliminary rounds the first week in February and then a competition in mid-ish February. If you go to the CSU Rights webpage, and if you look at the special events tab, if you drop down, you can find the 3MT challenge and training program page, which will take you to information that you can access at any point in time. A little bit about the 3MT challenge and an overview of it at CSU, not elsewhere, but just at CSU right now. And then there's program development training sections down below. You'll find your schedule there. And then the green, they're kind of hard to tell. They do show up as green when they're links on our webpage. So the view presentation recording for the training materials or download the participant guide, for example, those are links that can take you to materials or recordings. And we will continue to do that throughout this training program. So continue to look back to this page to see if there's new information or additional things that we've posted. We will likely let you know if there's anything big or important via email. In your packet for the participant guide, there's a schedule. And so when we do the weekly meetings here and we record them, we will be following this schedule. Again, these meetings will be Monday mornings at 9 to 9:30. And we'll just kind of go over a little bit of some opportunities for you to get together, but also then think about when you're and talk about when you're meeting in your cohorts. So these next couple weeks, as I mentioned, we're going to have a week of meeting here, and then we're going to put things on hold, which means it's really, really helpful for you to get connected to your cohort this week, to meet one another, introduce yourselves to one another. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then to put some things in place for how it is that you will want to work on your projects or not work on your projects over winter break. And then when we come back so that you can hit the ground running with drafts and of your presentation and of your slide. So there, when we're learning about how to do a 3MT, if you haven't done one before, the first step in this first week is understanding the rules. So that's one of the topics that you would want to talk about with your group and making sure that you understand the rules of the 3MT. And those are included in the packet in the guide. And then after that, we'll talk more about crafting the story, creating a slide, practicing, practicing, practicing. I'll give you a little bit of information and some tips today about crafting out a 3-minute thesis talk. We did a little bit of that at the intro session last week. I'll give you some additional tips to build off of those pitch practices for those of you who are going to be drafting and working over break. And if you're not, again, drafting over break, don't worry about it, but this is still really good advice for you to hang on to. I also recommend that you seek out 3MT examples and information that you like, that resonates with you, things that you can share with your group. It's really fun to see what other people like as well, so that you can see a 3MT through their eyes. It may even be a 3MT that you came across that you looked at and you're like, huh, it didn't resonate with me at first, but now that I see it through someone else's eyes, I can see their point and I can see why they like it. Not everyone will have the same style, or of course, as you know, the same stories or topics to tell, but how they land and how they resonate should be both engaging for the audience in general, but also, topically, sometimes that's less the point. It's about the story that they're telling, and can we get engaged with the story itself, less so about the content. We were talking about a pitch or a 3MT kind of process. We talked about this last week, how pitches are a type of genre. They structure your ideas, they narrow your focus, right? They just require that you distill your work into essentials, that you identify the most compelling information and valuable information for people to take away. They are ways for you to connect with other people. It really is a connection to your audience, a relationship that you're building, believe it or not, within 3 minutes. Super, super quick. And there is some sort of ask, or there's something there at the end in which people can feel connected or have a buy-in. For pitches, you're asking for something specific, perhaps it's a proposal or a pitch for funding or a job or other kinds of things, or maybe you're consulting, right? So th there can be pitches that sell specifically for something that's transactional. Here in a 3MT, we're doing it as a space of judging and feedback. Some of the advice that I would have over the next few weeks as you're drafting out your 3MTs is for you to process so that you can identify key ideas and distill them, right? To get to what's valuable. You can do that by creating a list of all the information and ideas about your topic. You kind of brain dump it out. And if you have 20 to 50 ideas or information pieces of information, don't worry about it. You can have a lot. Because again, distilling means that you can kind of done this big, huge grab of your topic, and then you're distilling it down. And then you group the similar ideas or related ideas together, and then you can identify what's the most valuable kind of portion or area for your audience. And so then you kind of take and narrow down to those top 5 or 6 ideas. So if you're thinking that your research is way too big to present in 3 minutes, this is one of the ways that you can distill it down. This comes from Brant Pindivik's The 3 Minute Rule. He's a Hollywood guy who did, I think The Biggest Loser was one of his shows. He's done a number of shows. He's pitched to National Geographic and all kinds of different venues. And he says that really when you're crafting a story within 3 minutes, that 3 minute rule, you need to know what do you know or do, why is it valuable, and why is that important? And he says those 3 things, if those are clear to in the story that you're telling about your work, he says it'll be clear to your audience and they'll take away what's important. We talked a little bit about the storytelling structure, and I'll give you an ABT method, an and, but, therefore system for kind of thinking about how you might arrange after you brain dumped and kind of pulled things together, how you might pull that together in a story or start telling a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end so that we are introduced to your topic in a way that makes sense and connects us to the value of your work without necessarily giving us the punchline yet. So it's about setting up what the topic is, but there's this problem, and therefore this is your solution, these are your findings, and this is what we know. We'll talk about that but therefore within the example of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, the introduction, because it works out really well. And I'm pulling this from a guide by Randy Olson. And Randy Olson was a field ecologist. Nope, that's not true. Sea ecologist who had tenure at the University of New Hampshire and left a tenure track job to go and do Hollywood films in science and came across pitching in the film industry and said, why is it that scientists are not always doing pitches and following this kind of logic for storytelling because it makes everything makes sense, right? So he says narrative is everything, but you can do an and, but, therefore structure for a sentence. If you're highly, highly skilled with punctuation, you can do it for a paragraph for sure, which is what we'll take a look at. And you can do it for an entire manuscript. The and, but, therefore is a logic of connection between ideas. So if you think about how you keep your listeners engaged during a 3 minute thesis or a 3 minute talk, that you're connecting ideas so that they are never lost. They always know kind of where it is that you're going and what's happening next. You are guiding them through the story. So in 1963, there was a March on Washington during the Civil Rights era in the United States. And Martin Luther King Jr. gave a very famous speech. The I Have a Dream speech is how it's known. And it starts off in this way. And I'm going to take you through and I'm going to have you listen for the and, but, therefore. And I want you to think about this in terms of storytelling and what's the story that Martin Luther King Jr. was telling. Notice that I put and I will clue in the but, and then I will also include the therefore in the story. Those are not part of his speech, but they're in there for your purposes. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. And this momentous decree came as a beacon of light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. So this is setting up the Civil War, right? And Abraham Lincoln and his Emancipation Proclamation. But, right, 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so, which is his, therefore, we've come here today to dramatize that shameful condition. And then he continues on. So this is the opening sentences of the I Have a Dream speech. And it follows that and, but, therefore structure incredibly tightly, right? It's built in. It sets up the context of which in a powerful way, looking historically, but also then culturally, socially, politically, where uh, post-slavery we are and why there is a civil rights movement, why there needs to be a civil rights movement 100 years later, 100 years later, 100 years later. Notice the cadence of the language, right, and the repetition. And so therefore, and the point is, this is why we've come here today, to dramatize this shameful condition. All right, so it's captivating, it's tidy, it's a great way if you are trying to figure out the logic of your story. What's the point of it? Why is it important? An and, but, therefore method is super, super helpful. All right. It might be easier if you're working with a draft of and, but, therefore, to kind of consider first what's the problem. Start with the but. That's always the problem. We have the condition, which is the and, but the but is the problem that needs to be solved, and describe the background later, and then put the therefore, and then reorganize it. So if you're drafting it, it might be easier for you to think about what's the problem first, and then can think about the conditions in the background, and then consider, why there's a logical outcome or what the point is. But if not, just and, but, therefore, remember that order. All right, we're going to post all of this information once again on your 3MT information page. And just a couple next steps for you. Just look for an email to connect you with your cohort. Reply all so that you can connect with your colleagues and identify a time and places meet this week to meet. That could be virtually if you want to meet on Teams. If that's the only way that you can meet, that's fine. It works. It's better if you can meet in person. So set up a time and a place in the library, for example, to get together. It's really nice to see people in person before you disappear for a couple weeks, so you can remember their faces really well. At your meeting, focus on getting to know each other and learning about each other's interests and the 3MT topics. And then talk about your 3MT presentation plans, if you can, over the next few weeks. And set up a day and time to meet then that January. If you don't yet know your schedules, and I know that was a concern that came up when we met last week, that some folks, your schedules might shift or change just a little bit. Do the best that you can in setting a meeting and just know that you might have to reschedule if that's the case. But I'd prefer for you to leave for break knowing that you already have something set, and so that you're coming back to meet in the program once again. And then Kimmy and I wish you a fabulous winter break and encourage you to reach out with any questions. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and stop the recording and see what questions you have.